Welcome everyone to the May 11th, 2026 workshop of the Hillsborough County Planning Commission on unincorporated Hillsborough County Urban Service Area. The purpose of this meeting is to provide an informational overview of the urban service area and its role in guiding growth and infrastructure planning in Hillsborough County. Staff's going to do some presentations. We're going to have some discussion. We got a bunch of county staff. Thank you all for your time and being here to also opine and give us some information. And with that, I will turn it over to Melissa Zornita.
Thank you. So, Commissioners, this afternoon we have this informational workshop that is responsive to your all's requests from your March Planning Commission meeting. So going back in time a little bit, at the March meeting, you did two things. First, you sent a letter to the Board of County Commissioners recapping the conversations you all had had about the urban service area and evaluating it. And then you all discussed a previous idea that you had had about having this type of workshop to make sure that all of you all were on the same page about understanding the existing urban service area, how it came to be, and how it works, most importantly, today. And so we have brought a bunch of our friends with us here today, and we're really thankful for their participation and cooperation in putting this all together. Because we've got not only our team who's done a lot of research and tried to do a lot of analysis and answering some of your questions that have emerged over the last few months, but also folks from different departments and agencies have come together to provide you all with a lot of information. The content, it relates to the questions you've asked and how the urban service area came to be and works today. It does not relate to how would it work if we did X, Y, or Z, or what would this scenario look like, or opinions about its success or not success. It's really more fact-based because that is the request that was made of us and the space that we're in, because we don't want to get ahead of the next steps and what the Board of County Commissioners might ask us to do in the future. So with that context, I'm going to turn it over to Melissa Dickens, who will get us started. Thanks.
All right, thank you so much. Melissa Dickens, Planning Commission staff. I'm joined on the Planning Commission team by Melissa Leinhardt and Yasser Gonzalez, and want to echo Melissa Zornita's thanks of all of our friends who are in the room today. We very much appreciate the support. This has really been a cross-division collaboration internally with the Planning Commission, and then a cross-agency collaboration with our partners at Hillsborough County. I did want to note before we begin the substantive workshop information that we did receive several public comments today. We received 8 in total, and I believe the ones that we received before noon have been printed and left for you. We did receive 1 additional comment afternoon, but per our protocols, we don't print anything we receive afternoon, but I did want to let you know it was there. So we are going to be providing a comprehensive overview and informational workshop. This is going to be a lot of content. It's going to be a little bit longer than some of the presentations you all normally see. We wanted to make sure that we were very thorough. We expect that the presentation with all of the staff participants will take about 45 minutes. We do understand that a couple of our county partners will need to depart before 5 o'clock, so we would suggest that we hold questions until the end, and then perhaps if someone needs to leave, they can identify that in their presentation as well. So with that, I will go into a little bit of a refresher of what Melissa stated. Again, this is intended to provide a shared understanding of the urban service area, and you'll see throughout the presentation we will call out when we're responding to a question that we've received. We received a number of questions from you all at the April meeting as well as over email for the folks who weren't there, so we appreciate that. And we'll be focusing on the tool's purpose, historical context, changes over time, and implementation. This is a refresher for you all, but for folks who might be less familiar, who are here, the urban service area is intended to be the primary location for growth within the county. It's intended to align with public facilities within the urban service area, within the urban service boundary. There are areas with higher land use densities and intensities, and certain infrastructure is generally required for development. In the rural area, these are areas that are outside of the urban service area, and these areas are intended to provide for long-term agricultural uses, rural uses, and natural areas. These typically have lower land use densities and intensities, and then certain infrastructure is limited. When the urban service area was set up and reflected in the policy language that you'll be seeing from Melissa Leinhardt today, there are several goals of the urban service area. Essentially, distilling it down, the boundary is intended to align infrastructure planning with areas for future growth. This also has some sub-goals of limiting costs of public services, ensuring the efficient use of land, conserving agricultural and rural land, and then preserving different development pattern lifestyle choices. So some historic context for when the urban service area was initially coming to fruition. There was significant population growth in the state of Florida as well as Hillsborough County. There were projections for even more growth. There was not necessarily a clear framework that existed in Hillsborough County for growth and development, particularly in the rural areas. And there were water and wastewater facilities that were planned, but they were not necessarily timed to accommodate future growth. And so I'll go through at a high level, some of the changes to the USA structure over time. For the first 15 years or so, there were a number of changes to structure, which I think is playing on the animation. Yes, oops, excuse me. Essentially, in 1993, it was adopted, the urban service area. There were also expansion areas that were called out outside of the urban service area. These were a result of negotiations with DCA and litigation because the original boundary was considered too large. In 1998, that is where Hillsborough County first adopted that 80-20 metric. You'll hear about that a few times again today. But that was adopted based on comments from DCA, what we now call DOC, which is the State Land Use Planning Agency, and they indicated that there needed to be a clear performance metric for the USA. Through discussions and review by staff and DCA, the 80-20 percentage was determined. It was based on the development pattern at the time and projections. In the early 2000s, the USA was updated to include a couple of areas within what we call now the urban service area, the urban development area, and expansion areas. And the expansion areas that existed outside of the USA was removed. In 2008, the plan was updated to remove these designations, and the structure of the urban service areas took the place of what it is today, essentially. And then there were minimal changes from 2008 to 2024. One other thing to note in terms of historical context at the time, there was a very strong state planning agency, the Department of Community Affairs, as I mentioned, and they had a very strong role in the comprehensive plan, determining what should be in the comprehensive plan, opining on things like the 80-20 metric. So that's something that has changed a little bit over time. Okay, so this is one of the questions that we received over email, and I want to spend a little bit of time on this slide because I know it's been something that folks are very interested in, and we've had a number of conversations about this. So looking at the goals, one might intuitively expect that there will be a number of other metrics on ag land, on vacant and developable land, on lot size, and we really I think that any one of those metrics could work for evaluating the urban service area, but staff is empowered to utilize the 80-20 metric that currently exists today. This is within our Objective 1.1 of the Future Land Use section, and we use this specific adopted measure intentionally. We want to make sure that we're aligned with what the policy direction says. There are a number of different ways that that the urban service area could be looked at. The data points that you see later in the presentation are in response to your questions, but we would welcome the opportunity to develop other metrics, to evaluate other metrics, to get additional input from this board and the Board of County Commissioners, but we would need to make sure that there is consensus of this board and consensus of the Board of County Commissioners. And as part of the research on this, we did look at different ways that one could evaluate the urban service area. And what we found is that there are a lot of different ways that you could look at the urban service area. There's a lot of different options. Different communities use different techniques to examine it. Different academic entities and articles use different techniques. So we looked at options derived from professional guidance like APA, ICMA. We also looked at some of the academic research, and then some of the planning documents and data sets that are publicly available, and really crystallize them down into 4 different options for if there were a desire to have another way of looking at the urban service area. Those are spatial analysis, which is basically using GIS to see whether the urban service area aligns with the development patterns, how ag is changing over time, how environmental impacts may be changing over time. Another option could be looking at infrastructure and service delivery. Are there services are the services being used efficiently within the urban service area, consistently with the adopted level of service? Is the cost to provide services lower? Is infrastructure underutilized in any areas? We also identified financial and performance metrics, things like cost of providing services, CIP funding. There's a number of different metrics there. And then policy and trend assessment, so either looking at potentially comparable communities or comparing a particular data set over time, benchmarking those to see how we compare to our peers or how we as a county fare over time. Again, we are open to any of these metrics. We're open to exploring more, but today we'll be focused on the 80-20 metric and then responses to your question. This animation, which is working, good. This animation, we had some questions about how the urban service area has affected development inside and outside the urban service area. So this shows development concentration based on different years. So we have 1984, this is going faster than I thought, basically it's 1984 to 2023. The takeaway is the growth first occurred in the northwest area of the county, the Brandon area. Then you see it filling in South County and some redevelopment happening in the central city. And we are going to hear directly from the property appraiser's office later today. They have some data as well that reflects this. So again, that goal of having 80% of new population inside the urban service area, this informed the changes that were made as part of the 2024 future land use update. And this chart shows that the share of new residents that are expected to be within the urban service area is expected to dip to 76% by as soon as 2030. And then by 2045, the share will decrease further to 74%. So this prompted some of the changes that we saw as part of the 2024 future land use update, and as well as some of the changes that were made to the urban expansion areas. And we also were asked to provide some information about amendments over time. Generally, this chart shows for the first 20 years of the urban service area existence, we received 4 privately initiated plan amendments during that period. Then in 2024, there was that update to the future land use section that increased the flexibility for applicants who may want to make changes to the urban service area. The board also directed the county to study large areas for urban expansion area, really putting the idea out to the public that there might be new areas in the urban service area in short order, and that's where we see the pretty dramatic increase in the number of applications. So from 1993 to 2023, we saw 4 in total over 30 years, and then from 2024 to 2026, we've seen 18 so far. And we were asked about some of the, what was the basis for the areas that were part of the initial urban expansion area. There are, again, a number of different data points that could be analyzed. We picked 4 areas, or 4 components to select the 4 areas: Waimama, Baum, I-4, and Little Manatee South. And I won't get into the details of the slide because of time, but basically because of the infrastructure and policy context, the growth trends, the land development patterns, and the infrastructure access, these 4 factors combined to select the 4 areas. And here's where we are. Here's where staff is with the UEA studies. We have the expansions to Waimama and Baum complete. With those expansions, there is roughly 229,000 acres within the urban service area. The rural area is about 354,000, and we have nearly 50,000 acres that are under study in both Little Manatee South and I-4. This study is quite comprehensive for these areas. We're looking at different land use scenarios, the needed infrastructure investments in coordination with the folks in this room, looking at different aspects of fiscal planning, and we're hoping that these studies produce some innovative approaches, some innovative ideas. We are active out in the community. We've been out every month, and we'll continue to be out every month in either Little Manatee South or I-4 over the next several months. We anticipate bringing back the results of this study later this year or early next year. And with that, I'm going to pause the history and data and turn it over to Melissa Leinhardt for the adopted policy context. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Melissa Leinhardt, the third Melissa of the day, Planning Commission staff. Great to see you all. We're switching gears a little bit here to look at what we currently have in the unincorporated Hillsborough County Comprehensive Plan. So on this slide, you'll see several goals, objectives, and policies from both the future land use section as well as the One Water chapter of the comprehensive plan. The policies that are shown on this slide are a brief snapshot of the language that we currently have adopted in the plan that specifically mention either urban service area and or the rural area. This list is not exhaustive, but rather a sampling to demonstrate how our current policy language relies upon the urban service area tool, which is one of the many growth management tools in our planning toolbox. So highlighting just a few of the policies that are shown here, the first goal of the future land use section focuses on growth in the urban service area and urban expansion areas so we can support existing and planned public infrastructure and services in those areas. Under that goal and elsewhere in the future land use section, we have policy language that focuses on the density that you would expect to see in the rural area and direction to establish and maintain an urban service area boundary to help accommodate urban and suburban level development as well as redevelopment so we can maximize the public investment that has been made and will be made in infrastructure and public services. And then I just would point out that in the One Water chapter, we also see policy direction about limiting public potable water and wastewater in the rural area and focusing connecting growth in the urban service area to the public infrastructure. And then this slide, the next 2 slides are actually about community plans. In unincorporated Hillsborough County, community plans are adopted as part of the livable communities element of the comprehensive plan. Currently, there are 23 community plans throughout the region in an unincorporated county. They're all adopted as part of that element within the comprehensive plan. And then this year, we did receive board direction to create start working on creating a 24th community plan, which would focus on the Lithia area. This slide also addresses, I believe it was Planning Commissioner Linkis's questions from last month's meeting regarding which community plans have a portion of their boundaries outside of the urban service area and are not in one of the urban expansion areas of I-4 or Little Manatee South. Those community plans are listed on the slide, and they include communities that are known for their rural character and their vision to retain that character, like Keystone, Odessa, and Lutz. And then Balm and Waimama were fairly recently part of a board-directed effort, as Ms. Dickens noted, to bring some of those community plan areas formally into the urban service area. Portions of those community plan areas do remain in the rural area, which is also supported by their community plan language. The remainder of the community plans that you see listed here on this slide, such as Town and Country, Apollo Beach, Riverview, those areas, these have areas within the community plan that are outside the urban service area, but they are mainly government-owned, so they're either owned by the state of Florida or Hillsborough County, and they contain significant environmental lands, so coastal high hazard area, significant wildlife habitat, wetland complexes, and then some of the areas like the hundreds of acres that you would see in something like that is more urbanized like Riverview, that's part of a nature preserve. So in this case, that would be the Triple Creek Nature Preserve. And this next slide is also about community plans, as I mentioned. It outlines those that include specific mentions of either the rural area and or the urban service area. That includes Keystone, Lutz, Waimama, Balm, Tonota Sassa, East Lake Orient Park, Little Manatee South, and Seffner Mango. And then on the second portion, on the bottom part of the slide, there's also some more generalized references to things like rural communities, small town character, density and land use transitions, retention of large parcels. Those are listed in other community plans like Brandon, Valrico, again, Little Manatee South, Gibsonton, and Ruskin. So this is all language that is adopted and part of the various community plans today within the comprehensive plan. And then previously, both Commissioner Kugler, I believe, and Chair Joseph, they had asked about various infill and redevelopment efforts countywide. So this slide does highlight some policy framework in the comprehensive plans, which include the Centers and Connection bonus in the unincorporated county comprehensive plan. This bonus incentivizes the efficient use of land through a density or an intensity bonus at major intersections that are identified as part of the community plans, as well as on roadways that have had existing bus service at the time of the policy development, and then transit supportive density by 2045, and or a designation of either a suburban town or urban general roadway on the Hillsborough County context classification map. Transit-ready corridors in the City of Tampa Comprehensive Plan are proposed mid-tier bonus areas intended to encourage transit-supportive densities in locations that are served by existing or planned transit service. Other ways we maximize infill and redevelopment is through the various other bonuses that are outlined in the comprehensive plans, such as the infill bonus in the county and the affordable housing bonus and transit supportive development areas in the City of Tampa. The last bullet discusses a policy that used to be in the unincorporated Hillsborough County Comprehensive Plan, the minimum density policy. That required developments in the urban service area to build out at least 75% of their maximum density that was allowed by their future land use category, unless they met some certain some exceptions, such as if the site had extensive environmental constraints, like a large wetland complex, or if there were compatibility issues within a certain distance from the site. That policy was removed in the 2024 Future Land Use Section update as directed by the Board of County Commissioners. But a minimum density requirement does still remain in that Centers and Connections bonus that I had mentioned in the previous slide. The City of Tampa had proposed minimum density originally in their update, which you all know is fairly recent, but ultimately it was not possible to pursue under Senate Bill 180's language about being more restrictive or burdensome. And then piggybacking on that last slide, staff has pulled some projects that really speak to development trends and will be explained later in the presentation, and then also showcase some infill and redevelopment projects countywide. So in Plant City, we have Midtown and Lakeside Station. In Tampa, we have examples of Water Street, Gas Works, West Rivers redevelopment, and Midtown. In unincorporated Hillsborough County, we have the University Mall mixed-use project. We have the Big Cat Rescue Site, which will be redeveloped in the near future. The rezoning has been approved. And then in Temple Terrace, we have an Amazon warehouse and the 56th Street redevelopment efforts. So with that, I will now introduce Mr. Yasser Gonzalez to go through the next few slides. Thank you.
That's right. Good afternoon. This is Yasser Gonzalez, Planning Commission staff. So we're going to be addressing a couple questions that came up during the various discussions we've had. The first one is this: is redevelopment active and effective? Have we seen any evidence that redevelopment is effective? Is the Planning Commission counting on redevelopment for new growth? So those are a couple questions. The other one is, what about valuations of land inside and outside the urban service area? What's happening there? We're going to be addressing that. And lastly, some of you are not familiar with our projections. We were very intentional in our communications of our projections back in 2023. Of course, a lot of you are newer than that, so we're going to just go over those and discuss them very briefly. Again, so this is like the interlude in between our friends that are going to come up and this one, so maybe like a palate cleanser with data, if you will. So the first item that we see here is that we went back to, we took 2026 parcels. We look at what has changed. What has a build date later than 2016? So, and then we went back and then identified what was there before. So typically we selected those parcels where something was already built. So we ignore agricultural vacant, and we selected where there was already a building or some sort of, built structure there. So we came up and according to the data, it appears that development or redevelopment itself is quite impactful. For example, 1,000 acres within the city of Tampa, back in 2016, it had 4,379 dwelling units or residential units. Come 2026, 13,786. So again, this is about 3xing the number of residential units there. When you go to the county, it's 7 times the number that's now there versus what was there in 2016 for the same amount of acreage. So again, Plant City and Temple Terrace being smaller and having a lot more vacant parcels. So they're more minor contributions, but still in there's also seen redevelopment. So this retrospective look at redevelopment, we've seen that it is giving a lot of bang for the buck. So what about the future? Are we counting on acres for redevelopment towards the future? Yes, we are. And again, it's a significant amount of acreage, and we have the table there, but the key idea of this slide with, all the numbers and things is that for the city of Tampa, for the acreage that have been identified as the acreage in which where new residents are going to be living in, more than 1 of 2 of those acres will be redevelopment. And then it goes down from 54% all the way to, for unincorporated county, for the acres that are going to be redeveloped, there will be 1 out of 4 acres will have to be redeveloped in order to accommodate new residents. Again, these new residents come to us. The estimate or the projection come from the University of Florida. BEBR is the outfit, so we do that. We take that new resident, and then we, using our future land uses, we try to find out where they're going to go likely. Switching now to valuations, just value. So the first thing is this: is there a significant difference between an agricultural parcel inside the urban service area and an agricultural parcel outside the urban service area? As you will see there, for this inflation-adjusted values, these are 2025 constant values for 3 years, 10 years apart, 2006, 2016, 2026. For these 3 years, we see that on every year that we see the 3 years, the valuation on a per acre basis for ag land is significantly higher than for ag land outside of the urban service area. So now, location obviously makes a difference. There will be, why would that be? We do have our friends from Property Appraiser that can kind of shed more insight into this. But again, definitely location is one of the big determinants. What about single family homes? are they more valuable, or they have a just value that's higher on a per square foot basis inside and outside the urban service area? And on your left-hand side, you can see that yes, as it was with agriculture, on a per unit basis, yes, there's the property that will be inside the urban service area will have a higher valuation, higher just value, a median higher just value per square foot. But then, yeah, sir, that's me. You're comparing, 1974 home to a smart home built in 2025. How is that fair? So we went back and also looked on the right-hand side to homes built in the same period and compare them together. And we can see there, the valuations are closer together. Why would that be? Because in a market, modern capitalist economies like we are here in the United States, when you have large differences within the same close by, consumers are going to make different choices to bring those valuations together. So that's what it's showing there. So when you're talking about a house that was built around the same period, similar material, similar cost of labor, you are seeing closer values, and that's something that we'll be expecting. Lastly, we're going to be talking about the projections. Our projections are parcel based. That they are based on the adopted future land use that's tied to that parcel. And inside the USA, you're going to see higher density and redevelopment potential being incentivized. Outside of it, in the rural area, by design, you have lower densities. And again, one of the things that we like to think about of our community plans is as a conversation with the public that gets memorialized in a report, in a book. So this future land uses has been a conversation with y'all, with the public, with the county commissioners. Almost everybody has had an input into what the future land use or the development areas that we have identified, like in Waimama, like in all the areas where we have said the development will take place here. So what we're seeing here for the projections is that the rural service area added 3,000 new residents between 2015 and 2025. The USA added 250,000 residents in that same period. By 2035, we're seeing the rural service area is going to add 96,000 new residents, and the USA will add 160,000 new residents. So as you can see there, we will need to deviate from historical growth rates inside the rural service area in order to accommodate those new residents. Hence, the need to study modifications to the boundary of the urban service area. Now, you may say, well, yes, sir, these numbers, the Planning Commission developed these numbers. Is there anyone else? What is everybody else doing? We have other projection, demographers in the area. Yes, we just looked at Fresh this morning, extra. The Water Management District released their projections in March 2026, and they as well expect over 200,000 residents in the rural service area by 2035, just like we do. So again, these are the things that we have this data point that's being corroborated. So without further ado, our friends are getting impatient. So we're going to be hearing from the Transportation Planning Organization, the property appraiser, development services, water resources, the fire and rescue, and of course public works. And they're going to go ahead and give you a little bit of information. Thank you very much.
I'm actually not getting impatient. Yes, it's a tough act to follow because he's very entertaining. Good afternoon, commissioners. I'm Johnny Wong. I'm the executive director of the Transportation Planning Organization, and my approach to teeing up this conversation for you is more to talk about how the urban service area affects TPO processes specifically. And a consistent theme that you'll find is that it informs much of the work that we do, but it isn't directly related. It's not a causal relationship, as you'll hear from some of the partners that follow me. So many of you already know this. The TPO, Transportation Planning Organization, TPO, is responsible for long-range transportation planning. We ensure that the transportation plan we produce is consistent with the adopted comp plans of the 4 jurisdictions. We also prioritize transportation investments to tee them up so that they can compete for federal funding and eventually get constructed. I'm here to introduce and briefly discuss some of the ways that land use and growth patterns impact the work that we do. There are, of course, a ton of intersections between land use and transportation, but the ones most germane to this conversation are our role in classifying public roads according to their functional uses, reviewing federal urbanized area boundaries and metropolitan planning areas, and modeling future growth to determine transportation needs. Beginning first with determining the federal functional class, AKA fun class. It's not such a fun class, but the functional classification of roads. The classifications spanned in descending order from top interstate, primary arterial, minor arterial, collectors down to local roads. So kind of in terms of how much traffic they carry in that order. The process of determining what is the appropriate classification is led primarily by the US DOT, Federal Highway Administration, but they coordinate very closely with state DOTs and MPOs because we have that local knowledge. We know how our roads are being utilized, whether they're serving long distance trips or short ones, if they're serving folks who are just making a quick stop to the grocery, or if they're more commuter routes. So the US DOT and the state DOTs rely very heavily on us to justify the classifications or reclassifications based on the purpose that the roads serve, the existing volume counts, forecasted growth, and any anticipated land use changes. With respect to the urban service area boundary and allowable land uses, any significant changes, especially ones that will result in significant volume increases, require or most likely will require a reclassification. So when you think about upclassing, a local moving to a collector moving to an arterial, and so on. Why is that important? Well, if a road is classified up, at some point it would need to be brought up to different design standards. And so the kinds of amenities you see on the local roads will not be appropriate for a collector or an arterial. Think about the additional cost of accommodating those design standards at some point in the future. As traffic volumes grow, then you see the need for bike lanes, intersection improvements, the spacing at intersections, traffic signals, accommodating utilities. All of that cost needs to be factored in. The second consideration of classification is that some federal funding programs are tied to a specific fund class. That can change, of course, with each new federal transportation bill that's authorized. The rules can change, but right now there are many federal funding programs that are specifically directed to arterials and above. There's quite a bit of money that's laid out for arterials and interstates, relatively less for collectors and minor arterials. Does that mean that there will be a lot of money available? No, not necessarily. If expansion beyond the urban service area boundary results in a lot of population using that road, certainly the state DOT and the US DOT would recognize a need and they might be able to work with us, but the federal funding programs that currently exist kind of lock you into certain pots of money for certain road classes. I won't go into a ton of detail, but I included this map in your slide deck to see how some of the roads that you know are federally classified, as well as the urban area boundaries, which is distinct from the urban service area boundary, and I'll touch on that now. Second responsibility of the TPO is to review and comment on the federal urbanized area boundaries, or UABs. The way that this process is done is starting with the geographic urban core, city of Tampa. Each year that the census data is released, the feds kind of look at how is that expansion occurring? Is it significantly dense population, and is it contiguous to the urban core? And wherever that density kind of falls off represents the edge of the urbanized area boundary. Well, why is that important? Because that informs how metropolitan planning areas are drawn, the boundaries, and the metropolitan planning area boundaries establish whether or not we can use federal funding to make road improvements on roads that fall within that boundary. The good news for Hillsborough County is that, I'll go back to this map, you see, well, you know where the urban service area boundary falls. It kind of aligns with the edge of the urban area boundaries shown on this slide. The planning area for us already extends to the edge of the county. And so we're required to do long-range transportation planning that accounts for the needs in Hillsborough County, but outside of the urban service area boundary. We are able to use federal funding to improve roads beyond the urban service area boundary. Let's move next into the long-range transportation plan and modeling. Let's see, what did I want to say? Well, it is a regional model. The Tampa Bay Regional Planning Model is very important to the TPO because it forms the foundation of what the needs will be over the next 20 to 25 years. The model is built using existing and forecasted pop-in jobs data. The pop-in jobs estimates are then coded into approximately 760 traffic analysis zones. These are small little census geographies that capture numbers of how many people are living there and how many jobs are located in that area. And then we try to figure out how many trips are occurring across these TAZs. We're doing that every 5 years to estimate what the traffic patterns will look like in Hillsborough, and our partners across the region are all doing the same. Then, based on the known and predicted travel behaviors, that model can help us take a guess at which roads will be at or over capacity in the next 20 years. Again, I can't emphasize this enough. It's not limited to just Hillsborough County. It picks up trips that are happening all across West Central Florida. Trips into and outside of Hillsborough County are all considered. So the urban service area boundary at best is only implicitly considered in this process. It definitely informs the model because with a growth management strategy in place, you expect population increases where that growth is directed. But if that were to change, if the county were to explore different growth management strategies, that would be captured as part of our regular model process update. So from the TPO perspective, that's not tremendously impactful. I included this map to show where the urban service area boundary exists. This map was taken from our currently adopted long-range transportation plan. The thick black line is that USA area boundary. And if you scan around that black line, you see on the periphery of it, you'll note that we already anticipated that there would be some pop growth in the TAZs outside of the urban service area boundary. So again, the specific growth management strategy in Hillsborough and Pasco and Pinellas is not directly factored in to how this model functions. But that brings me to my final point. In terms of prioritizing transportation needs for public investment in Hillsborough County, regardless of what growth management strategy is implemented, the model will still be able to assist us in identifying the need and prioritizing those needed projects. The functionality of the model does not come into question. It shouldn't be impacted. But just like all of the other policies affecting transportation trends, that strategy will have to be thoughtfully considered as we develop the rest of the long-range plan, guiding policies for how we invest money into the roads that need to be improved. What I'll say about that is we have a large backlog of projects that the county has needed to invest in, and it's growing larger every year. Definitely a more succinct list from a more compact geographic area allows us to better prioritize projects. As that growth management strategy expands the area in which we're assessing need, it definitely becomes a challenge to justify funding those investments because we have projects that have been sitting on our priority list for 20 years and they haven't moved. So adding to that list does not advance us to where we need to be. I'll be happy to answer any questions at the end. I'm not one of those people that has to get out of here before 5. Property appraiser?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, Madam Director. I have to tell you, I would never have thought some 3 decades later I'd be at the Planning Commission answering questions about the urban service area since I was here when it was created. But it's an honor to be here. So I think, first of all, as a matter of background, just to sort of cut to the chase, in terms of the urban service area as it exists or as it's known, it is not something that we would consider, although we're aware that it exists, in terms of valuation of property. Each year our assessments are based off the year's prior qualified sales, and really all of the factors that may create a qualified sale. Really, the urban service area in and of itself is not something that we necessarily consider as part of that. As you look at this slide, and it kind of piggybacks some of the other slides that you've seen, you can see that the urban service area in terms of value, now this shows building density of all improved parcels that are greater than $10,000. And you can see that within the urban service area and the various iterations with expansions and what have you over the years, that it shows the majority of, that it's, at least from the standpoint of value, that it's served that purpose. And I will apologize because I am one of those people that has to leave, so I'll take the questions at the end. The next slide, and this one, and first to speak to the difference in the ag differences, I know that were spoken to before. Again, based on sales, we don't consider highest and best use or what something may be. So if a ag parcel that's within the urban service area has entitlements or is teed up for a certain type of development, obviously the land value and the sale may be higher because it has those entitlements. Also, you also have to factor in things like the commodities that are involved, different, whether it be cattle, whether it be strawberries and other things. So there's differences in terms of values. So that probably speaks to some of what Yasser was speaking to earlier. This slide is kind of illustrative of values inside and outside the service area, and it kind of, when we first did this slide, it kind of jumped out at us because if you look in 2025, there seems to be a difference between the value or the sale prices, median sale prices, outside. As we looked at it, that seems to really indicate or has more to do with the types of properties that are being developed outside of the service area, where you have properties that are building very large homes, what do we call them, McMansions, or these large ranchettes that tend to be more expensive in terms of construction as well as sale prices. But it's interesting when you actually look at the difference in terms of median sale price being about 33%, the difference, but then when you look at per square footage, it's about half of that in terms of the actual cost. So I would say that as you look at this, it might say, well, what's going on that the values outside are that much higher, the sale prices are. I think that really is more related to the types of residential properties that are being developed outside. And again, these are not adjusted for inflation, and these are also only unincorporated Hillsborough County sales statistics, where I believe the ones that were presented earlier were all of the urban service area. So now you're taking in, obviously, if you add in South Tampa and other places like that, it equalizes these numbers a great deal. So it's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to answer any questions I can. Last time I talked about this, other than being in the legislature, it was never contemplated we'd have a Publix in Waimama, but we do. And so that tells you something as well. So are there any questions that you may have? Come on, Steve, you got to have something.
Oop, turn your mic on.
Sorry, as far as this is concerned, is there, I imagine there's not, but was it taken into account the acreage? This looks like median sales price. I'm assuming, is this for a home or on a per acre basis?
I think it's just the property, and Rick, just to correct me if I'm wrong.
This data happens to be single-family homes.
Single family.
You got to come identify yourself.
I'm sorry.
The data that we showed you was simply single-family homes.
Identify yourself.
My name is Rick Rape. I'm the Director of Evaluation. I work for this guy.
Thank you.
The data is single-family homes in unincorporated Hillsborough County.
Okay, so could it be skewed because the median price is higher in unincorporated because there's more land involved as well?
That's where you're seeing the bigger homes on acreage. Think Keystone,
Right.
Odessa areas. Like Coach said, we've excluded the incorporated areas like South Tampa, Davis Island. They're not included in that data. So to a degree, it's somewhat misleading unless you put that, that fine point on it.
Right, okay, thanks.
All right. I did have one quick question, Coach.
Yes.
I'm doing some research myself, and I noticed that between 2010 and 2020, the neighborhood of Fishhawk Ranch extended eastward across the county to cut off the top of the neighborhood that's the north-southeast part of the county. I was wondering why did that neighborhood change so drastically, the Fishhawk neighborhood? It basically took in a lot of agricultural land out to the east and kind of changed the dynamics there. I don't know, you might not have any idea about that. I know.
Are you talking about the neighborhood evaluation in terms of
No, the
neighborhoods?
The area, the actual map area for Fishhawk Ranch was capped, and then the area for the southern eastern part of the county came up, and they kind of did this, and then after 2010, Fishhawk does this all the way to the end of the county. So it basically took in a lot more agricultural land into the Fishhawk neighborhood based on you guys' neighborhood. And you might not know it. I know I'm just kind of.
Well, we certainly could take a look at that research. Now, I don't know exactly why, because in general, our neighborhoods are groupings of like parcels.
Right.
So I'm not sure why we would have included those, unless that's a portion that is for future expansion. But then
That's what I was thinking.
right, which
was
it
my
may
only thought.
be, but at the same time, the vacant land wouldn't be valued, any differently than we would segregate those two things out.
Okay. Just a personal curious. Maybe I'll hit
But
you up
now
by
I'm more
email.
curious, so I'm going to go look tomorrow.
All right. Are there any other questions? No? All right. Thank you for your
Well, I
time.
appreciate it and know that we're available. Anytime I can dust off my planner hat, I enjoy it. So thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Adam Gormley. I'm the Department Director for the Development Services Department, and I'm going to kick off the Hillsborough County staff presentation. I'm going to speak briefly on the Land Development Code and how the urban service area comes into play in the Land Development Code from a regulatory permitting standpoint. Obviously comes into play when rezoning decisions are made, but I'm speaking at this point to just what we have codified in the code and how it works from a permitting standpoint. I'm going to really focus on utility service. It was stated that utility extensions are desired to be limited in the urban service area, the rural area. And they are, but there are some exceptions to that. So I'm going to speak to utility service in the urban service area and the rural service area. So in the urban service area, utilities service is generally required for all new development. There are some exemptions in there, existing lots, so lots for single-family or two-family homes that were subdivided and created prior to July 26, 1989, are basically grandfathered and can connect to well or septic service. There's also exemptions for agricultural uses. Large lot agricultural land is not required to connect in the urban service area. And most notably, and this is something recently that the Board of County Commissioners has changed in the Land Development Code, is there's exceptions for a 3-home equivalent service, 3 equivalent residential connections, which is approximately 300 gallons a day of water, when service is not immediately available. So if a gravity line is not available in front of a development site for wastewater service, or a wastewater line not proximate to the site, and the development is 3 home equivalents or less, that could be a 3-lot subdivision or a non-residential use that has that same water demand, there's not required to connect to urban public utilities. And this was a change that was, I believe this board may have heard that and had some encouragement to the Board of County Commissioners to take that up. We were experiencing some real challenges with people having one home, looking to split it into putting another home on the lot, and the cost to extend those utilities made those projects basically unfeasible. Sometimes, tens of thousands of dollars to extend the line. So right now, that is an exception that's in the Land Development Code, and appreciate your all's leadership and assistance with that, because it was a good change for the community. I'm going to speak now to what the service in the rural area. So generally in the rural area, new development is to be served by well and septic. There are a number of exceptions for this one as well. So again, it's a general preference, but not an absolute. One exception that we've had for quite some time is if there is a documented health hazard or environmental condition that can be best addressed through the provision of public utilities, and there is an environmental regulatory agency that supports that position. That is a administrative exception that can allow extensions of lines. I will note that in all these extensions, the use of the exception is predicated on the physical ability to serve that. So the line, there must be capacity, the line must be usable, and John McCary will speak a little bit more on that, but the technical feasibility is a mandatory criteria for these. We also have something the board expanded on recently, Board of County Commissioners, is what we used to call a single service connection, and that is a connection in the rural area to a line that's adjacent in the right-of-way to a development. In that case, connection was permitted. In the past, when it was a single service connection, there could only be 1 meter, so that meant that a subdivision that was going to tap into an existing line would need to have a master meter, and then the water would be individually metered on site. That was recently changed by the board as well. So now we have an existing line connection and a single service connection. Single service connection is what exists in the Keystone Odessa Community Planning Area. They are not, the recent changes were not applicable in that area, but the rest of the county now allows what we call an existing line connection, very similar to single service, existing line in the county right-of-way, capacity to serve. However, now that line, that project can have individual meters. The house could be, a subdivision could be subdivided into individual lots, and it's viewed as a good use of existing infrastructure. A couple other areas where exceptions are allowed is service for public schools. It's allowed to extend in the urban service area. A recent exemption is a development within a quarter mile of the urban service area that has flood zones on the property. So the thought with that was wanted to not have a situation where properties were forced to connect to septic and potentially have septic in areas that might be prone to flooding. That is now a codified exemption in the Land Development Code. Two others that we've had, or two other scenarios that we've had for a while, is if it's a wellhead protection area or a Tampa Bay water wellfield mitigation area within a certain distance of the urban service area is also allowed to connect when they're clustering lots. And finally, the kind of a catch-all that's been added to the Land Development Code, again with some recent amendments, is that a process for the Board of County Commissioners to make an exception for overriding public interest. And this is based on whether a project would promote the public health, safety, and welfare, and create environmental, social, transportation, or other benefits to the public. So this was envisioned for things like community centers, county projects that are in the rural area would benefit from public utility service. It also has been used for an economic development project in the McIntosh Road area, Muck Pond and McIntosh Road area. An area where there's utility service in that general area. Lines were brought in for a school, and there's some higher densities planned there. The board took the first overriding public interest exception and did approve water and wastewater service in that area, and that's available for other projects that are on the horizon. Lastly, I'll just speak briefly. This is not having to do with utilities, but having to do with the distinction between the rural area and the urban area and how it is designed, or the feel or the type of lifestyle that's being promoted. We do have several regulations that make the distinction between the urban and rural areas. Two main ones are the Keystone Odessa Rural Area Development Standards and the Lutz Rural Area Development Standards. Both of these apply only in the rural area of those respective community plans. They provide some guidance on how projects are developed with trying to promote a rural feel. We have two subdivision types that make distinctions about urban or rural areas. Conservation subdivisions stand for a clustering of lots and allows a bonus based on amount of open space, and that open space is different in the urban or rural areas, more open space in the rural than urban. We have a category of minor subdivisions that allow for a different type of road to serve a subdivision of 10 lots or less. It provides a little less vigorous standard, safe design, of course, but a little more akin to what we would see in rural areas. And finally, recreational vehicle park and mobile home parks in the urban area are treated differently than in the rural area. They're allowed to have a little more density, and in the urban area, non-conforming mobile home parks can be converted to affordable housing projects at that non-conforming density and not lose that, and that was an incentive to keep them in the rural area. It's a brief overview of some of the distinctions in the Land Development Code. I will be here till after 5, so I'll hand off to the next county speaker. Thank you.
You're after me. Afternoon, my name is John McCary. I'm the Planning Section Manager for Water Resources Department. And so I have a few slides to talk to you about really how important the urban service area is as a planning tool for our utility. And it's interesting because Adam Gormley just touched on it and Melissa Leinart brought it up. We actually do not do planning outside the urban service area for utility service, except as some of these exceptions that come through that Adam touched on as they qualify and as they approach us and we start looking at them. But in terms of a broad geographic scale, we do not plan for service outside the area. And so really when we're looking at our plan for geographic, or most important things from a planning perspective on geographic areas, 3 key questions. One is, where is the boundary we're going to serve? How much capacity is needed within that boundary? And then as you get to smaller regional areas, and when is it needed? And so this isn't my best analogy, but I'm going to use it anyway because I still haven't come up with a better one. If you think of where's the boundary? Where would we need to put buckets to fill up? How much capacity in certain areas? How big should those be in specific areas within that boundary? And then when is the capacity needed? How fast are you filling that bucket up? And so we have historically had very accurate flow projections that I'd love to really take credit for in my team, but the reality is we use the parcel level projections that Planning Commission does. We have used and reviewed the ones that SwiftMud does, which really do very accurate small geographic scales at the parcel level within their respective future land use areas. This image on the right is our South Central service area. I'll talk about that a little bit here in a couple slides, but this shows where our wastewater service boundaries are for our respective wastewater plants, or I should say what it's going to be in 2029. Today, only 3 of these 4 actually exist. Our Falkenberg there, it's kind of on the top left, Valrico, top right, South County, bottom left, those exist today. We are in the works of a very large capital improvement program. Our One Water program overall has a lot of different CIPs. We're phasing that in over time. Right now, one of those is we are building a brand new wastewater facility called our One Water facility that's off close to the southeast landfill off Baum Road. And so what that's actually doing is taking a big chunk of the urban service area where it goes today to those other 3 facilities. We're carving out a chunk right in the middle that will take flow from each of those 3 and send it to our new facility. This, I know it's probably kind of busy, give you an idea of what that would look like over time. Again, I don't want you to focus much on the numbers per se, but just to illustrate what we're looking at in the future, the red lines for our existing facilities, that's the top left there, Falkenberg, top right, Valrico, bottom left, South County, is where we intend our permanent capacity to be for those facilities in the future with our One Water program. The green line the green dash line is kind of an ideal operating capacity where we would like the facilities to operate at or below, because that allows us to take equipment offline. We can do major improvement and still have capacity where we can still, offer our appropriate service. The bottom right shows how we intend on that one water facility to grow over time. That one, the figure shown is a little bit different. The red dash line is where we anticipate to be early on in the construction of the facility when it comes kind of the day one or day close to one capacity. And then somewhere between that red dash line and the ultimate 30 million gallon per day plan there, the solid red line, we haven't yet kind of laid out at what time intervals we're going to grow into that, but that's how we plan for it to grow. And so you'll see the green dash line there. We anticipate also in the future years when we realize all these, not just our current projects, but the future projects as part of that program, we will be able to operate that facility at I'll call it comfortable capacity. So I mentioned, I won't go too far into this. For those who don't know, we, from the utility, have two defined service areas, our northwest and south central. We have some other smaller systems that we serve, but the two dominant are northwest and south central. Northwest is effectively built out. All of the recent studies, as you all know, are really focused on what would be adjacent to what we call our south central system. So one of the things that as I'm working through with my staff and working with the other agencies is anytime we're planning for these other scenarios of how we're going to expand, we would need to know where are the limits of that expansion, because again we need a geographic boundary to kind of give us the constraints, and then what would be that build out capacity. In this case, we're saying the future land use guides us to that. We know what the density would be, how much water and wastewater they would use and generate, and then how would that grow over time. So if somebody came to me and was like, all right, well, we need a scenario for growing into the system, then those were the questions I would come back and say, these are the things we need to know in order to give an accurate plan as to how we could serve that. Again, just a note, I wanted to point this out. We don't have separate impact fees for urban and rural area. In the case that there are connections outside the urban service area and the rural area, they pay the same impact fee that would otherwise be paid for development. In the urban service area, we do have different fees for the two different areas. In the Northwest, because it's predominantly built out, that impact fee is really going towards payment of capacity, paying into the capacity that we already have in that system. The South Central, which is, as it will grow, and I won't list the specific numbers, but if you're looking at the table on the bottom, by 2029, the South Central impact fees are more than double what's in the Northwest, and that's because that's the cost for the projects that we're paying for now to move forward to create that capacity and what we have projected to do in the future. So I will be here for as long as needed. I'll turn it over to Fire Rescue. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Chris Rideout. I'm an Infrastructure Development Manager for Fire Rescue. I appreciate the opportunity to address you this afternoon. I extend the apology of Fire Chief Doherty. He intended to be here and he had a last-minute call, which took his time up. I'd like to spend a little bit of time telling you about how fire station planning in the urban service area commingles. Fire Rescue has a facility strategic master plan, which is updated every 5 years, the most recent update of which was in 2023. We work with outside planning consultants, most recently with Stantec, to review 3 areas. Those areas are call volume and response times to those calls, unit utilization rates, how many calls can a fire rescue unit go on per day before their operational effectiveness is impacted through fatigue and other things. And then they also look at initiatives that your group has, the Board of County Commissioners has through land use amendments, code amendments, and other initiatives, in addition to development trends, to see what future development impacts may have on our plan. We presently have 6 fire stations under construction, either new fire stations or redevelopment of existing stations which have exceeded their functional usefulness. Only one of those 6 does not have urban services. We presently have 46 existing fire stations in Hillsborough County, 13 of which have no form or either no water or no sewer. Urban services are an important determiner for where we place fire stations, but they're not the sole determiner of where we place fire stations. The greatest value for us in urban services is the availability of the hydrants, which typically comes with the placement of water facilities. This prevents us from having to take water to the scene of fires in large tankers, and it makes water readily available to fight fires in neighborhoods. Our planning practices generally call for a new fire station about every 18,000 residents. Now, that's general numbers. It depends on the layout of that development and those development trends and the density of that development. Fire stations that are not in urban service areas typically require larger parcels of land, which become more problematic to site and more costly. Those parcels need to be larger because if there's no hydrants, we have to place a water tank at the fire station, which could hold 2,000 to 5,000 gallons of water, so we have the ability to fill our engines and our tankers. And then the impacts of septic systems on the station. No urban sewer, we've got to create septic fields, and with the volume and frequency and amount of use that our fire stations get, we really have to create a large septic field. So that makes our fire station sites larger and larger. Our urban strategic facilities master plan is planning for 28 stations built over the next 20 years. We're presently approved and funded through 28, and we'll be asking for the addition of 2 new stations to get us through the 2030 planning cycle. And with that, we have our planning chiefs here. We have to leave at 5, so if there's any questions, we'd be happy to answer those questions, try to answer those questions.
Are there any questions from the commissioners? Not seeing any. No? Well, thank you for the information, and I just want to say good job on responding to our plan amendments that come through. I've noticed an uptick from Hillsborough County Fire on
Yes, sir.
definitely speaking about road widths and things going on in the development, so we appreciate that.
Yes, sir, thank you. I'll pass that along to the fire chief.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Good afternoon, Kim Byer, Assistant County Administrator, and they saved the best for last. This is last, so we're going to, let's see. There we go. We were asked to speak to you today on how the expansion of the urban service area affects public works. So as you may believe, or additional stormwater maintenance. As properties are being built, additional stormwater maintenance is required, ditches, inlets, so additional maintenance for our team. New signals to operate. So we operate all the signals in Hillsborough County, in addition to those for DOT. So additional signals will need to be maintained and operated. Additional pavement. New roadways leading up to those new subdivisions are maintained by our team. New street signs, all of those maintained by Hillsborough County. Additional service level expectations. More frequent mowing in the urban service area than the rural areas. Double. Greater roadway wear for higher traffic volume, meaning more potholes, more service requests from our residents. Travel time for our service units. We currently have 3 service units, one on Linebaugh, one in Dover, and one on Rodine Road. So as the urban service area expands, their travel time increases, making our response time much less. How can we fund some of those, some of the capital needs that may be needed due to the expansion of the urban service area? We utilize mobility fees. They're collected for capacity only, for adding capacity to the infrastructure. That means sidewalks, turn lanes, and improvements in gaps in our sidewalks. Typically, the mobility fees are collected after development, when they're as the properties are CO'd. Therefore, the development and expansion of these roadways are several years after development has already taken place. Operation and maintenance of capital maintenance projects such as repaving, repairing existing sidewalks aren't eligible for mobility fees. Those are typically funded through gas tax, general fund, and CIT. Some of these services may not be able to be conducted without additional funding through the CIT or through general fund or gas tax, excuse me. That completes my presentation. I'll turn it over to Melissa, number one.
Well, I think Melissa number one is right there, but thank you so much to all our county partners who have been here. We really, really appreciate your time. We appreciate you all for, asking these questions. We had an opportunity to dive in, and appreciate all the support from across our internal staff and our external partners. So we now we're going to stop talking, and we're going to ask you all if there are any questions that you might have or anything that you wanted to discuss in a workshop format.
All right. Are there any questions, thoughts, comments from the commissioners? No, you don't have to rush to it. That's a lot of information. Commissioner Singh, yeah.
There's always a joke when I was in working for the home builders of Pasco County builds for us, Hillsborough County reacts to us, which is if you think about like Big Bend Road versus like Highway 54, Highway 56, those roads were widened and built out before the home builders even came in, versus like Big Bend, it's been, kind of congested and everything happened after the fact. So my question is that a result of the Public Works getting their money after the fact, or is that a planning thing from like the TPO? Like when we're talking about services for people and where we're pushing growth and development, one of the big things that we've always noticed is that Pasco had it a little bit different than we did in Hillsborough County. So just kind of curious about the answer to that one.
Yeah, sure. So I definitely would like Kim's assistance on some of this, but one thing that, and not having worked in Pasco, I'm not sure how they prioritize their capital improvements. Perhaps someone from the county can answer that. But one thing that has affected transportation down in South County is the change to transportation concurrency. So there used to be a requirement that roadways could be, that new development could not be approved unless there was transportation capacity. That has changed, and some of the developments that we've seen come through in South County have happened after that law was changed. So that may be one reason why some of the things in South County are happening the way that they are. But I don't know if Kim has anything to add.
Yes, that concurrency obviously impacts us. Mobility fees, like we say, were collected typically after the development is already CO'd and people are living, impacting those roadways. And once the fees are collected, it could take, again, 3, 5, maybe even, we have up to 10 years to spend that mobility fee dollars. In regards to Big Bend, we just now are receiving federal dollars and state dollars for the widening of one of the bookends of Big Bend. And you've probably seen just recently the expansion of one of the eastern areas near 301. Yeah, I believe it's 301, being expanded. So it is, in some instances, very retroactive. And Adam, would you like to add anything on the development services side?
Adam Gormley, I will just emphasize the point of concurrency was really a significant change for us. That changed in 2011, went from a concurrency system to what's called a proportionate fair share, and then changed to proportionate share. The formula that was used there really impacted the ability to use that as a tool. Previously, that was something that we're able to use to look at capacity impacts of development at the time they're permitting and have them create transportation improvements, but it is a tool that we don't have any longer. And I think that is very significant in terms of the timing of the improvements. I'll just note that one of the things that we are looking to do, and this is something that we will do in partnership with development applicants, is look to have their mobility fees spent by them to build transportation infrastructure up front. So rather than us collecting the fees, spending them on a project, have the developer build those up front and use their mobility fees and basically as an offset to their fees. We've had some success with a couple of developers on that, but it does depend on having a willing developer in that situation. Thank you.
All right. Commissioner Bowden.
Yeah, so we're still talking about the concurrency. So there's a possibility that development that has happened maybe 5, 10 years ago still do not have infrastructure.
With respect to transportation infrastructure?
Infrastructure, whether it's water, sewer connections.
So there is still water and sewer concurrency. Those are still things that are required to be in place prior to development. It was roadways that was, or transportation that was changed back in 2011.
Okay.
We have, we can bring some items back on this, or I can email you, but we have adopted level of service standards in the comprehensive plan. And in order for developments to be approved, they have to meet the level of service, and things like the water, the wastewater, solid waste, those are all things that are required to be met prior to development.
Commissioner Kona.
Yeah, over the recent years, first of all, thank you for the presentation. I thought this was very, very helpful. During recent years, we've seen, a dramatic increase in the expansion of the urban service area. Have we, and I know the cost associated with the expansion, but has the county seen significant revenues as a result of that increase, that expansion?
Yeah, thank you. I might ask one of our county partners to respond. Is Greg still?
Everybody's looking around.
Okay, thanks. I can't speak to that, so thank you.
I'll say that at least we're starting to. So we have, as mentioned, mobility fees that comes in with, we collect that money when a home or development gets a certificate of occupancy. In these urban expansion areas, particularly the BOM and Waimama, we are seeing more activity there. We're seeing some developments that are coming on that would not have been able to come on under the rural service area and RP2 and Waimama. So we are seeing that come in. The revenue will follow that development. So I'd say we're seeing a shift, but it's not, there's more to come in the future.
All right, good question. Any other questions, comments from the commissioners? Commissioner Linkus, I see you moving. Oh, turn your mic on.
I guess I'm just looking for a little more information on that. So it sounds like you're speaking about mobility fees to cover the cost of the service extension to those projects, right? That's the revenue that's anticipated to come in?
The mobility fees, would be based on the demand of the development. So a single-family home, what's the average trip length and trip generation? It doesn't necessarily factor in the cost to extend the system to serve that, but it's more on an individual impact of that permitted structure's transportation impacts.
Okay, so it's kind of like those units are just kind of paying some of the share of their own costs?
They're paying, yes, ideally they'd pay 100% of their costs. We are right in the end of updating a mobility fee study. So, the fees are based on a study. The studies are done at a point in time, and at such time as they're updated, the idea is to catch 100% of the cost based on updated transportation costs and any change in trip characteristics from the uses.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Sieben.
So for that study that you're talking about, historically speaking, have the impact and utility fees covered 100% of the extension costs to date?
Yes. Depends on how historical. There was a period of time where I can speak to the impact fee side of that was significantly lower than what the actual impact cost was. We shifted to mobility fees in 2016. Prior to that, we had transportation impact fees, and it was sometime for that study, that study it was used to establish the fees, hadn't been updated in some time. So in 2016, it was updated with the mobility fee approach. I believe it was adopted at close to 100. I think it might have been a little bit less. I'll say the old transportation impact fees, in addition to having an age study, they were actually set when they were first adopted at 85% of the calculated cost in 1996 or somewhere thereabouts. So I'd say in the past, they had not kept up with the cost increase because our study and fee structure didn't keep up with it, but we are more recently getting into that 100% cost recovery, and each of our mobility and impact fee ordinances do require an update to that study be initiated every 4 years.
I think I remember when this happened. It was back in 2016, and it was a rollout of increasing every year, correct? It was, those fees increased on an annual basis up until it was supposed to be 100%, I think.
There was a phase in,
Right.
yes, of those fees. We did, in an update in 2020, introduce a cost indexing concept, whereas the idea with that was they didn't have to wait for the study to be updated to have a new fee, that there was an ability to update based on price increases, but changes in state law had made that something that we couldn't do, so that's been taken out of the ordinance. Now we rely on the update of the study, and we do that in accordance with the Florida Impact Fee Act, put some controls on how often we can update the studies.
So just so I'm clear, since for the last, 10 years or so, since 2016, when this was implemented, we're at a point now where we're covering most, if not all, of the impacts via the fees?
At the time of the adoption of the study, so when the study comes in, there is if costs increase between those studies, then that's something that gets captured in the next update to the study. But generally, that is the intent with all of our impact fees, to study them and present them at 100% of the actual cost of the development, consuming the capacity on our system.
And I know the property appraiser is no longer here, I think, but my question was going to be about property taxes and whether or not those taxes handle any of these costs as well. Does anybody know the answer to that?
Good afternoon. Greg Horwodow, Deputy County Administrator. Thank you for your thoughtful questions. I could expound on this for a long time. There's a high-level philosophical discussion that we probably need to do some table setting. Remember that property taxes only cover some of the service that we provide on a countywide basis. We have two separate general funds, one for countywide and one just for the unincorporated areas. I'd also point out that it's difficult to say that they're for instance, impact fees, mobility fees. So yes, the law says we can get up to 100% of their impact. The problem is we have a lot of rural roads that lead into an urbanized area. So you can charge them for their impact, but that's not the cost of widening a 2-lane road to a 4-lane road. So the county is then expected to come up with that difference. And
Can you, I'm sorry, I want to understand what you're saying.
Sure.
Can you explain it one more time?
The impact, if you have a level of service and it's not at an F, you're allowed to charge mobility fees, and I'm going to rely on Adam, who is our resident expert, to make sure he corrects any misstatement I may make. You're allowed to charge them up to the cost of their impact on the system. The problem is if you're going from a 2-lane road in a rural area to a larger 4-lane road, you can't widen to the 4 lanes and charge the developer that cost. You can only charge them the portion, that was really the basis of proportionate share, the proportion that they impact the system. So that means, in many cases, when you had a rural road and it needed to be widened to 4 lanes and the county didn't have the money, we would have dollars sitting in the bank for some portion of that project, but not the entire project. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So going back to what your question was about, do we collect enough in property tax to pay for our services? I will say that our unincorporated general fund is always under stress, and we have seen a significant amount of municipal service demand in the unincorporated area. If you think of it, it's like a city. We provide city-level services with the lowest rate in the county for those services, property tax rate. So it is difficult for us to do that, but we have managed. Our county administrator, Bonnie Wise, has been very aggressive about making sure that we're doing things as efficiently and effectively as possible. Every year during the budget cycle, we'll do the same thing this upcoming budget. We'll look for things to address. I can tell you with property tax reform on the horizon, we're going to be very mindful of that. So it makes a difference when we come to a budget and we see things like transportation that need to be funded. Water and sewer is its own enterprise fund, so if there are issues that need to be dealt with there, they have to deal with that on an enterprise fund basis. Same thing with stormwater. They're also an enterprise fund. So some of the detail that you've heard today really is funded by the enterprise funds, and I'm always impressed by the level of technical expertise that we have at the county when they put project designs together, trying to make sure that we can meet the need. But I've got to tell you that it is a challenge for us. I'm not going to say that it's easy to do when we don't have roads that are, in Pasco's case, fairly well-defined and state-funded. They put a lot of their developments along state roads that are already improved, as you just heard from Mr. Sink. We don't necessarily have that capacity anymore in the rural parts of the county. If you look at the state roads there, they're in many cases 2-lane roads. And I can think even going out to Plant City, 92 and Martin Luther King, both of them state roads, and this is not suggesting that the state hasn't done enough. It's simply a fact that there hasn't been enough money to widen those roads. There's a lot of cost in the right-of-way acquisition, and it makes it extraordinarily difficult to widen roads that are already surrounded by, I'll call it suburban development.
2 questions. Sorry, guys. One, is there anything that we can do as a municipality to encourage the state to take action on those roads to help us? Is there something Pasco was doing that we're not doing?
So we have excellent representation at DOT. We have a great relationship with the district secretary. I think there's a lot of money that now is flowing into Hillsborough that was not 10 years ago. My expectation is it's always helpful when we have advance support for projects and for things that the state wants to do here. Talk to your local legislators. If you know of a road that needs to be improved, the state can devote money to that, but it does take the support, not just the Planning Commission and Board of County Commissioners, but also our local legislative delegation. I think it's important to recognize that we've dealt with a lot of very technical detail. It's important to come back up and look at the overall, I'll call it the philosophical approach. There are things that we can do to help guide growth. What we can't do is say a celebration or a seaside needs to go right here, and once that's done, we're done. We have so many more people moving into Hillsborough County because we are a desirable place. You can't just say, as some have suggested, that the urban service boundary shall never be violated. If that's the case, then we'll have a lot of lawsuits from landowners that will say, wait a minute, you can't arbitrarily say you can't expand on my land. So we balance all the time when we get requests from developers outside the urban service boundary, how that's going to impact our overall level of service. We try and make good recommendations to not just this body, but also to the board. And I think there's a larger question at work that we need to step back and take a look at is, where do we want to see the expansion occur? We don't really have a suburban category. We kind of need something to bridge the gap from urban to rural. And I think it's really important. Your staff does a great job, by the way, and I'm not saying that just because they're here. I think they do an outstanding job of helping guide these conversations. But at the end of the day, this board really does need to give us guidance on the county side. Where do you all think there's some growth opportunity? We're not going to stop growing. You're still going to see that development. What you don't want to do is see a very small house on a very large tract, and then that precludes any rational development to happen in the future. We'd much rather see the value for the development help pay for the services that are necessary. When you have a lot of very small homes that don't have a high value in a rural area, it costs a lot for us to provide the service, and it's difficult.
I had, sorry, one other question.
The last one. You got to
Okay,
give somebody else a chance.
I'll be done after this for a minute. The proportionate share agreement that you were talking about, is that, do developers pay the proportionate share agreement in addition to mobility fees and impact fees to widen a road, for example?
So Adam, I think, has done an outstanding job of working with the development community to try and see what we could pay for upfront or as part of the development. That is a negotiated agreement that really puts the mobility fees toward those improvements. And Adam, if you want to talk about any, I can think of Westlake, for example, that Adam was instrumental in putting together.
So we do have, as Greg noted, 2 projects, 3 in the works where those mitigation agreements are in place. The idea is that is in lieu of paying their mobility fees, they'll build an improvement, and we look at the actual value. So it's not an arbitrary number. It's a calculated, evidence-backed expenditure of the mobility fees.
Okay, thank you.
And I would say, I think it's always best to work with the private development community on those improvements. In many respects, they're able to deliver it faster, cheaper, more efficiently. We have state-required procurement rules. If we can get the developer to do the improvement, we're happy, because that means that we're getting extreme value for the dollars that would be paid, and we're putting it in service much sooner than we as a local government could do.
All right. Okay, hold on. Let somebody else, and we can come back to you. Commissioner Lauk.
Happy to talk as long as you want.
It's a fascinating topic that we're on, and I've heard a lot of things back and forth in the last 10 to 7 minutes, and the question that I wrote down is, like, what percentage of development pays for itself in Hillsborough County? And I don't think it's just a function of mobility fees or developer fees on the front end. It's a conversation about property tax, sales tax, utility tax. I mean, all the other revenue the county brings in as a result of the development that happens, balanced against the roads, schools, sheriff, stormwater, all the different things that we have to pay as a county. One of the things I heard, I think, in that conversation is the low-density development that's happening outside of the urban service areas, making it almost an impossibility for us to pay, for the development to pay its way in advance and on an ongoing basis. So I guess my question becomes, if you were making a recommendation, how do we get to a point where I'm not necessarily advocating for directing where the growth goes, but how do we get to a place where the growth is paid for between those 2 buckets? We'll call it the one-time fee and then the recurring revenue that the county would bring in as a result of that development happening. I think that's really the root of the conversation that we've had here in the last 5 to 10 minutes, is how do we get to that place where development is going to pay for itself, where we're being more proactive as a community, similar to the Pasco example that I heard at the start of this.
Yeah, great question. Melissa Dickens, Planning Commission staff. So I'm going to respond to the first part and then see whether the county would like to add anything. So that is one of the intents of our urban expansion areas. We're really trying to be proactive in looking at those large, almost 50,000 acres. Our staff is studying to figure out, okay, what what density makes sense from a fiscal perspective? How are we going to serve it? How can we make sure that we have the services there ahead of development? So you're absolutely right. Those are exactly the kinds of questions that we need to be considering. And the two areas that we're looking at right now we're hoping to achieve that in those areas. So as a starting point, I would say those urban expansion areas are probably the top priority where we as a staff would recommend that we focus. And then I know that the county probably has some other things that they may want to add. And I think I want to recognize that John McCary had something to add about the fees earlier as well. So I just want to make sure that everyone's has an opportunity. Thanks.
John McCary, Water Resources Department. I actually can partially answer your question and your question here from a utility perspective, so it's good timing. I want to point out from utilities perspective, we get money from fees and user rates. So the impact fees should go, and it used to be called, I don't know the history of how it changed from capacity fees to impact fees, but the impact fee should cover the cost of new capacity. Because I did want to point this out, it's actually on slide 40. If you can't go to it, you can trust me. We can. Oh, you going? This one. This one. Yeah, you had it. I'll get it. Oh, there you go. So I didn't explain fully what this table was, but actually that option 5 down there, you asked about a rate study. We went to the board last year, the end of 2025, got a unanimous approval to increase our impact fees for the utility, so the utility-specific water and wastewater. And actually, as of March of this year, so the table down there says option 5, that was the option that we moved forward with. As of March of 2026, the 2026 column is actually in effect. So I could have edited the table, maybe taken out where it was in 2025, but I thought the perspective was good. So as of 2027, and I won't go too far in the weeds maybe with the table, we will have the full recovery of potable water impact fees. They requested, so that it wasn't just lumped onto the development community all at once, that we grow into the number on the wastewater side that'll be effective 2029. So 3 years from now, a little less, we're growing into the full cost of what that impact fee would be. I think I at least covered mostly the utility portion of that question, and I'll step back.
I think trying to forecast the future, I mean, if I could do that, I don't think I'd be here right now. I'd be sitting on a beach and sipping a Mai Tai or something like that. Having the ability to work with our partners is crucial. One thing we did with the school board, for example, we had a lot of conflict is probably the right word, with how to site and locate schools. We then have since worked with the school district, and I think very collaboratively, and developed a process whereby we look at the proposed locations and we determine what infrastructure improvements might be necessary so that we can not have a school be sited along a road that needs hundreds of millions of dollars of improvements, and that is not an exaggeration, to have that be a functional school site. So we have, I think, looked at how that process can help better decide what locations should be in the priority order. I will say, and I think it's been a great process. We've worked successfully over the last, I think it's now 3, almost 4 years since we've had that in place, and we have not had some of the same issues. So it is going back to what I talked about earlier, being able to talk with your partners, talk with DOT, talk with if there's water and infrastructure that needs to be delivered, talk with our service providers and make sure that we're able to meet the demands, not just for schools, but really all the other services the county provides.
All right. Commissioner Seaman, did you forget? You good? All right. Are there any other thoughts, discussion points, questions from the commissioner? Yes, sir.
I'm probably the least qualified to discuss about how to make developments pay for themselves, Mr. Lau's question. Nonetheless, redevelopment is one of those tools that are out there to incentivize development, because usually you have a lot of infrastructure already in place, so you can then increase the density. Another thing is, like Ms. Dickens said, this expansion or changes are signaling to the utility, because they just said right now that we do not plan for areas outside of the urban service area. So again, looking at changes in the urban service area are where they're going to have the right signal for them to make the right, appropriate decisions that would help those developments get closer to paying for themselves.
All right. Commissioner Linkus.
I guess, my takeaway from some of what I've looked at in this topic is a little bit what's been coming up here is, with the initial cost of the connections to services, you may be able to have a study that's current enough to get you pretty close to covering those initial costs with those fees. And it sounds like you all are doing an amazing job of doing that. But I think what we're also hearing is that, one, there's cumulative costs and weight on the system. So all these 2-lane roads, all these bits and pieces out there that, as development moves into another area, begin to kind of create new demand for higher levels of services, create concerns about the congestion. That's where I think our rural areas, and we hear all the time sitting in here, we see the folks come in and say, we don't have what we need out here. And to me, it's plenty of evidence that we're not quite getting there with the formulas that are working as much as people want. And to me, the research says, we haven't quite figured out how to connect that. We've got some good ways of kind of finding that initial funding for that initial connection, but it's that longer term service. And I know everyone here is looking at, what's going to happen with property taxes, because that's how we're supposed to handle that. So I think this is just a really important question. I'm glad these questions are being asked about, especially our expanding into rural areas where the fees and the planning of the infrastructure, that ship has sailed in some of these places. And then if we're going to now introduce new densities, how are we going to pay for that difference, that gap that wouldn't be there? So I think these are really important questions. And I did want to introduce that Pasco does have some unique tools. So it's some of the ongoing operational costs for our utility systems that I think that we really struggle in Florida to figure out how to pay for. Pasco does have like a penny tax to support operations. They have a countywide TIF. They have some different tools that we do not have. So I think we would really struggle, based on kind of the dynamic that I've seen in this area, to figure out how to address some of that cumulative, long-term operational kind of piece. So I don't think that we can just say revenue in, revenue out, and it's just for the connection, and it's an easy kind of formula.
All right, Commissioner Lau.
I was remiss in my last statement. I meant to lead with thank you. This was very informational. Really appreciate you bringing everybody together. I thought it was a time well spent. Thank you very much.
All right, I'll throw my comments in the middle. You guys can think about some more. I did want to say the presentations, all of them, were very good, and I want to thank you all for being here. The information is really great. A couple of things that I missed, and it's okay, this is a process, we're going forward. Let's not everybody get excited now. I know when I start talking, everybody's all clutch your pearls. We had a lot of good talk about the development side of the argument, but kind of as Commissioner Linkus started to bring up, there's a rural side of this argument too. And I think as these conversations go forward, we have to start to look at how we're impacting our rural and agricultural areas and how we're protecting or not protecting our rural and agricultural areas. Because after we sort of get through these money and development discussions, that's the next immediate, big elephant in the room, if you will. So as this goes forward, I'd like to see some, information on that. We've kind of showed how development has changed. I'd like to see how agriculture has been protected or not protected. Additionally, I was wondering, in Ms. Dickens, in your presentation, you spoke about spatial analysis. What do we do as an agency for spatial analysis? Is there anything we do right now, or is it just strictly the 80-20 that we use? Because I'm hearing some voices from the other county departments saying that they look to us kind of to give them a little bit of leadership as to where things are happening or should be happening next. So again, that goes back to my question about our ability to empirically look at things and be leadership in those ways. So I just wanted to just put that question out there to you about spatial.
Yeah, absolutely. So as staff, we think it's a great question for us to look at further. So spatially, there is a lot done at this agency. I don't think anyone from, well, we have Daniel from ISTS, but I won't make him get off the system there. But there's a tremendous amount of both GIS mapping, the interactive mapping that we have on the website. In terms of analysis, it tends to be project specific. So we would have the ability, so for example, I was trying to get to the slide, but you saw the, so the basis for how we came up with these urban expansion areas, this is all spatial data. So we mapped everything out, looked at how everything overlapped and overlaid all the different layers on top of each other. My point about the 80-20 was that, you know, I as a planning commission staffer could come up with 10 different ways to look at the urban service area, but really what we have adopted today is the 80-20. That is something that we consistently come and report to you. I know you're very familiar with it, but in terms of spatial data and analysis, we would have that capacity, but we have not done that with respect to the urban service area effectiveness as of this juncture.
And also along those lines, granularity, I noticed you're certain your data. My first question that I thought in my head was, well, is this max acreage that we're looking at here when we speak about acreage? Or are we getting granular into the data to understand how the actual ground is being used in these areas? Or are we just kind of taking a parcel and a max acreage number and then making assumptions based on that? The reason I ask, because there's wetland areas, there's different things on different parcels. So to take a parcel that's 5 acres and say, well, that's 5 acres that's going to be used for residential, that really isn't accurate, if you will. It's not precise. I'll put it that way. It's not precise. So I'm trying to understand how precise these numbers we're dealing with are, because, you know, you take a population number and you're beating the Bible about we have to find room for these people. Well, is the land that we're setting aside actually enough room when you get to a granular level, I guess is my question. So how granular is that data, or is it general? Which, you know, it's fine. I'm wondering.
We are parcel data evangelists in this agency, so we do almost everything we do has to have geolocation, and although we do use the max, acreage or the acreage for the parcel, we also look at historical development trends, which is another feather in the cap. Of our IT department. Most of the data you've seen here, we've been able to go back very easily to 2006 or earlier because of the fact that they have done such a great job stewarding all these data sets. Going back to all that far. So again, we do look at max, but we also look at, for example, typical densities for these future land uses, what has happened in the last 10 years, 20 years, and then we project that forward, yes.
Okay, and one last thing, Ms. Dickens, as this goes forward too, again, I talked about the spatial stuff as we go forward and the agricultural communities as we go forward. One big thing that's so far, and we're still early in this because I tripped this off in December and it's been, again, clutch pearls all the way to get to this point. But as we go forward in this, besides the agricultural community, I think something that Commissioner Linkus brought up very early on is the fact that we need to be more sensitive about how we're developing inside the urban service area. We need to be more efficient in where we're placing stuff. I get it, we need to look out on the edge and see where we need expansions, but we also need to relook inside and understand how to put more and more efficient density and development inside the urban service area. And I don't know, again, Mr. Hordell spoke about those in-between groups, suburban, urban, rural. We don't do a good job at this agency, and I've said this for years, about understanding that suburban. We're good at urban, and then we're good at kind of rural, but we don't really have a good handle on that suburban thing. So I think, I'm okay, again, as I said, although people think I'm the crazy man who wants to get rid of the urban service boundary. I think, again, it's a middle ground of finding areas and phasing areas, and that part of that has to be looking inside. Again, on the borders of the city of Tampa, on the borders of Temple Terrace, on the borders of Plant City. We should be looking at all these border areas as a county. We just had something come before us, annexations, right? And that the gateway area, and right next to the gateway area, I'm looking at agricultural properties. our staff as planners needs to see these maps, and it should trigger something in you to say, well, hey, the gateway area is really high density, and we still have all these county areas right adjacent to it that are these urban kind of areas. Clearly, that's something has to happen there. So in those interstitials, we need to start understanding and looking at putting density, in those areas where it's appropriate. So as this goes forward, not just, I know everybody's cheerleading for the 2 studies that are going on, and these 2 studies are going to change the world and change everything. We'll see. We'll see. But I think as a staff, we need to be looking inward into the inside of the urban service boundary. And what are the policies? Because those are going to be tough policies to make. We know how the people who live there feel now. It's difficult for us to go south of Gandy. It's difficult for us to go anywhere. That city of Tampa, different municipality, I get that. But I'm just saying, the not in my backyarders never want more. So as an agency, we need to be thinking about that, not just thinking about the edges. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, thank you so much. Your point is very well taken. It's certainly something that we are trying to do with the Tampa plan update, looking at those areas within Tampa where there are more appropriate areas for increases in density and intensity. Under the current state law framework, we're also really focused on incentives. And then we do have a couple of things that we're going to be bringing back to you at a future date, like, for example, the infill along Beta Bay, looking at the land use corridor there, looking along 301. So you're absolutely right, and we are marching in lockstep.
Thank you. All right, Commissioner Lucas.
I just want to note, I think if I understood some of the data that was presented, and thank you all, these were really informative. I think one of the things that I think it's Commissioner Sink who's brought it up, that the pressure outside the urban service area is an economic pressure. And I think some of the data was so interesting here about sort of the land values being very different, but then the recent home values are almost the same. So that tells you that you're, in my mind, you're building a very high-end kind of housing market outside the urban service area. And I could be extrapolating too far, but I think we also heard that from the property appraiser. So these are like sort of luxury homes, larger homes, McMansions. And I thought it was really interesting, coupled with the fact that there was the removal of the density requirement in 2024. So from what I know, and it hasn't been my business, personally, but I follow it a little bit. The home builder market in Florida is usually max 6 units per acre, typically. So we're talking about typically lowish density outside of our urban service area, a high-end product. This is the stuff that really concerns me, because this is not going to solve our affordable housing issues necessarily. It's not going to get us efficient infrastructure provision. And so I really appreciate your comments that we need to kind of look really carefully at what we can do inside the urban service area. And try to be as least, my bias, as you all know, is always try to be as least disruptive outside of that line, because what we're getting is costly. Now, it is what the market, it's what's selling. So there's demand for that. And, maybe, we need to figure out what to do. How do we think about that? But I just think that's not what our plan says that we should be prioritizing. So that's a big concern for me. I did want to ask, too, about the data that, I had the question here. So the projection that 96,000 would be coming into the rural service area, I think by 2035, is that based on already entitled, or where does that come from?
That comes from where we have identified developable acreage, which is ag and vacant land, and also whatever is redevelopable, which is not a lot outside the RSA. So that is typically where that comes from. And again, you apply the future land uses there, and then go forward. We will have, again, looking at also at historical, trends within those future land uses, what has happened in this other corner, where that future land use was there. And then we will try to replicate that forward, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess it makes me wonder if we could really look kind of fine-grained at kind of where some of the larger land holdings are, a little bit more research on that, because I think those are typically, those can maneuver through processes and can be more streamlined planning processes. And sometimes, I guess I just wonder where, it may be some information about sort of where is land most fragmented in ownership versus where there's large land ownership. I would anticipate that we would see very different trends over time in the way that land is used, and that might help us inform this moving forward.
We also have a feature class, a layer of developable and redevelopable lands that we also have made available. So, that's our best guess as of the time. And again, that gets updated every 4 years, every time we do this exercise.
Ms. Zornita.
Yeah, if I could, I would just say that when Yasser identified that this issue was occurring, that we were going to have that much growth in the rural area, we said that's not what the rural area is, how much is envisioned to go in the rural area, but also that's not the most efficient way for Hillsborough County to provide services. If we allow all of the Res 1 to develop as residential 1 and all of the 1 unit per 5 acres to develop as 1 to 5. I mean, that's what essentially those projections are showing happening. Instead, we can identify places within the rural area where we should have logical expansion and identify, can we take that on some portion of this 50,000 acres we're studying and say, can we cluster and have, a good chunk of that population clustered in that area? Some nodes around I-4, a new town center in Little Manatee South, something like that, so that the county can more efficiently serve it, and we then don't have quite that level of rural growth and still maintain some of the agriculture, and it maybe achieves a number of the same goals. So that was part of what prompted in 2024 the policy changes with the board, was seeing that this isn't gonna work from a number of the county's goals of the comprehensive plan to have that type of development pattern in the rural area.
That really helps frame things for me, because I guess when I'm reluctant to see us kind of continue to sprawl outside the urban service area in low-density forms. And I think that's what's tricky here is, if we just kind of say, let's open it up, we're going to probably get the low-density communities. But if we are aggressive about thinking about where some new strategies could go in place, I think we would have some better options.
I mean, unfortunately, Mr. Horadell and I worked on an I-4 corridor plan, what was that, 2010?
Seems like forever.
It was a really long time ago. And if that had been in place, maybe we wouldn't have some of the semi-rural-ish stuff that's happened along and now is going to make it harder to develop in some of those areas, because we have a lot of 1 acre subdivisions now in Thanona, Sassa, in the areas around Plant City, that make it challenging to have more dense growth in some of those areas, because we need to respect those areas. Those people aren't going anywhere. And so now we have to design something around those areas. But yes, that is what otherwise would fill in those, and we got to figure out how to work around it now.
I just want to say one thing, and I'll jump to you next, Commissioner Sieben. Now, that's a good point you bring up, Ms. Zornita, and I wanted to add, as we go forward, Ms. Dickens and Ms. Zornita, you're going to hear a lot about this. You've already heard some of it from me. The development community has to be involved in this. You and Greg Horadell sitting in a room talking about what goes on is an echo chamber, and it's a good one because we're all institutional people at this level. We need business people who are going to build the residences that we're imagining are going to be built, right? So as this goes forward, I want to hear from the Tampa Bay home builders. I want to hear from the Urban Land Institute. I want to hear from private developers. I want to hear from not-for-profit developers. If we set aside 50,000 acres and then that 50,000 acres isn't money-making, what are we doing at the end of the day? You know what I mean? So, and I get the exercise is fun, us talking at high levels to ourselves, but at the end of the day, this has to hit a market somewhere. So those people's opinions are seriously important. Let me jump to Sieben and I'll jump back to you.
I just wanted to speak about the data that Commissioner Linkus mentioned. It's funny, we looked at the same stuff and got the opposite conclusions. So what I saw with that median land price chart was that they were on a price per square foot basis inside the urban service area and outside the urban service area. It was effectively very similar, and given the fact that you're probably going to have an acre or two more land outside the urban service area, that's a value of $50,000 an acre. So I would argue against the McMansion development outside the urban service area because it doesn't equate to the added value of that land that's most certainly going to be there in a house that's built outside the urban service area.
See the importance of development lines? No, I'm just, good points, Commissioner Seepin. Mr. Lauk.
I mean, I look at it through the overarching goal of how do we lower the cost of housing for the residents of Hillsborough County. And just to echo on your point, if we don't have all of the stakeholders at the table as we continue this exploratory conversation, then I think we're really missing a key piece. And if we were to fold in the development community into this conversation, I think it would only benefit us in the long run. And it's one of the points that I made in the prep for this meeting last week to staff, that I think it's really important that if we have a second session that we hear from that community. Individual developers, boards, groups, committees, however we want to do it, I think we probably need to extend the invitation to have this same style of conversation.
Ms. Zornita, been patient.
So a couple of things. One, within our study that we're doing right now, we very much are seeking out the industry representatives to be involved, agricultural development community. We have a real estate market analysis that was done, but we want that to be vetted by those folks who are in the industry and let us know if that is realistic, and we want their input throughout the process. So we have been very focused on making sure those sectors have been a part of it. Just spoke with Commissioner Jemison a couple weeks ago about getting the Plant City EDC more involved. That's very much a part of the current studies that we're doing. And as I would envision that once the board gives us some direction on how they would like to move forward on this, I'd have a consultant on board to manage a study, and absolutely one of the first things they would do would be to talk to a whole host of stakeholders on this.
Well, I don't think we should wait on it. I don't want any more feet dragging. I brought this up in December, and here we sit 5 months later talking about it. It doesn't have to interrupt what the Board of County Commissioners has going forward with the expansion areas. I keep bringing up the point that those are two separate issues, and everybody keeps trying to make the studies going on the all in all. Those studies are focused at expanding the urban service boundary. Commissioner Linkus and myself just sat here and talked about the importance of looking inside the urban service boundary for opportunities. That's currently not going on.
No.
So it's two different kind of arguments we're talking about here. And again, when we went before the Board of County Commissioners last week, we didn't get an action. They could have taken an action if they wanted to, but they're clearly going to take an action in the future. And that, to me, gives credence to what Commissioner Lauk said, that this is an issue that this board has to take on. So I'm of an opinion we don't need to sit back anymore. We need to, go forward with looking at this and trying to figure, some sort of recommendation out whenever it comes up. I don't feel that we should sit back and wait any longer. I could be wrong. I could be outvoted. Obviously, there's different opinions here, but to me, it seems like this is an important issue that we should look at, as soon as feasible. And we're not going to dump other important things. There's a process and a way things need to get laid out. But beforehand, where I was like, okay, well, let's kind of wait and see. Like, they've spoken. I mean, they seem like it's coming. It's coming is what it sounded like to me. So.
Well, yes, I definitely got the indication that Commissioner Whistle would be bringing something forward, but we did not hear from all of the board members, and I don't know.
Well, we also heard from Commissioner Myers, who tried to group what we're talking about in with the current study, and you said that we shouldn't, which I agree with. So we heard from
Right.
Commissioner Myers. We also heard from Commissioner Cohen, who brought up the idea Commissioner Sink brought up at our retreat about looking at the urban area boundary and maybe using that. But Commissioner Cohen also spoke about the fact that whatever we do need to start considering how these services line up with the urban service area. So we heard from different Board of County Commissioner members, and again, there's something coming from them in the future. So the idea that it was just one commissioner that
Oh, no, no, no.
There's
I'm
not gonna-
No, I'm not suggesting that. I just am saying that until we know what they want and what direction they want it to take, I don't
Well, I
want to
disagree.
go off in a different
I
direction.
would go with what Commissioner Lauk said. We're an independent body. Commissioner Lauk brought that up at the beginning. We're an independent body. We make a recommendation. That doesn't preclude them from going off in whatever direction they want to, but we can give them some information so that when they do go off in a direction, they have some input, as Commissioner Sink was kind of afraid of last time about them taking an action without us, right, being able to look through information, make some sort of recommendation. Our recommendation doesn't preclude them from doing what they need to do, to Commissioner Lauk's point. So, again, to me, it seems like we should be moving forward somehow with something and not waiting any longer, you know what I mean? And again, I'm not talking about rushing and dumping everything and this becomes number one priority at all, but the stance that we need to sit here and wait for them to do something, I think is that doesn't make sense to me. Again, we're an independent body, so we're, I mean, I could be wrong. I'll listen to my commissioners,
Well, I think it would, since you all can't take action at a workshop.
No, yeah,
It
totally.
would probably be good for us to have that discussion in June.
Not now, not now. I'm just saying, you know, it's a different stance than waiting for the Board of County
Yeah, no, I
Commissioners to,
understand. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, Commissioner Singh. You canceled it, all right. Are there any other thoughts, comments, discussion items? Not seeing any. Everybody's had their fill. Then, all right, we will thank you all for the information. It's been a really good workshop. I hope it's been good for you all. Thanks for all the presentations, all the hard work. Staff did a great job, Ms. Dickens. There's a lot of information. I'm glad to understand the history a bit better. I have some questions about it, but I'll ask you that over coffee sometime or over email. So, all right, if there's no other comments, questions?
Question.
Yeah, Commissioner Bowden.
Is it possible we can get that information?
Yes, I did want to
Yes.
ask
Oh,
that
I
too.
meant
I wanted a copy of the presentation.
We'll send out a copy.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
That is, oh, wait, I guess I should tell HTV. We'll come back at 6 o'clock to start our public hearings. I know we're 3 minutes over. So we'll pick this back up at 6 o'clock, and at 5:34 p.m., this workshop is adjourned.